Hello, this is Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia, The Well, a podcast series about topics of interest to Ukrainians around the world. Today is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Our guest today is former Ambassador Kurt Volker, who was a special representative for Ukraine negotiations from 2017 to 2019, and U.S. Ambassador to NATO from 2008 to 2009. Welcome, Kurt. How are you?
Very good, Michael. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming back to talk with us again. So, if you can, very briefly, just give our audience some information about your educational and professional career.
Well, it's been a long road now. I got my master's degree at George Washington University in School of International Affairs, now called the Elliott School, and grew up outside of Philadelphia and went to Temple University there. And lived in Sweden as a high school student for a year as an exchange student. Lived in France during my university time at the Institute for American Universities in Aix-en-Provence. In the Foreign Service, I have lived in Belgium at working at NATO a couple of times, in the UK, in Hungary, and several tours of duty that were regional in nature. So I did a lot with the Balkans, a lot with Central and Eastern Europe, a lot with NATO enlargement. And then, as you mentioned, after leaving the Foreign Service for the first time in 2009, I did another 2 years, 2017 to 2019, as a special representative for Ukraine.
Kurt, what is your current assessment of Ukraine and its ability to get back the occupied territories from Russia?
Well, two different ways of looking at that. One, I believe that Ukraine is stronger than it was in February of 22. I think it has a better equipped, better trained, better experienced, and far larger military force. There is a better defense industry. It is innovative and it's developing and using drones in a way that is saving lives, Ukrainian soldiers' lives, and is effective on the battlefield. And it has great friends in the West, many countries that are providing finances, providing military support, providing political support. So Ukraine is in a vastly stronger position than it was in February 22. Russia, I would argue, is in a weaker position. They've knocked out probably a third to a half of their military capability, their conventional military capability, but they still have a lot. Now, a different question which you asked is, can Ukraine take back the occupied territories militarily right now? And I would say there the answer is no. It doesn't have the military means, particularly doesn't have the air power that's needed to really have a combined arms assault to dislodge the occupying Russian forces. These forces have been fortified and fortified over the past few years. So it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for Ukraine to remove those Russian forces right now. So I think we are looking at a different phase. We're looking at recognition that, or no, let me use a different word. We're looking at an understanding that Russia will continue to occupy parts of Ukraine for some time to come, but Ukraine can continue to get stronger politically, economically, and militarily while that happens, and accelerate its joining the European Union and positioning eventually to become a member of NATO.
Does Ukraine have any specific strategic advantage in the war with Russia?
Well, yes, the number one thing is motivation. And many military theorists have said that will accounts for at least three times any measure of actual military capability. Ukrainians are motivated because they are defending their homeland, their families, their loved ones, their territories, their houses. It is their lives, their country, and they are fighting to defend them. That is a far greater motivator than the few $1,000s Russia pays the Central Asian troops to go kill people in Ukraine without even knowing why they're there. So the motivation on the Ukrainian side is vastly better. Coupled with that, you have better organization, you have better training, you have higher regard for the value of life so that they are interested in protecting their soldiers. There are many other advantages that Ukraine also has. And then finally, you have allies, you have friends, you have countries that are helping. Russia gets artillery shells from North Korea and drones from Iran, and they sell goods to China to get some money. Ukraine has countries like Germany, France, UK, Poland, Lithuania, United States, Denmark, Sweden, all providing finances, military support, advice, coaching, and global integration to Ukraine in a way that Russia's lacking.
Do you think it's possible for there to be a 30-day ceasefire in the Russian invasion against Ukraine at this time? And do you believe that President Putin has any interest in doing this?
Well, of course, a ceasefire is always possible if Putin wanted to do it. Problem is, as your question indicates, he doesn't. Putin has no interest in a ceasefire. He wants to turn up the heat, and just look at what he's done this past weekend with hundreds of drone and missile strikes on Ukrainian territory. He's trying to convey a position of strength and resolve. And he doesn't want to have a ceasefire because um, that would, in the long run, advantage Ukraine, I would argue. And so he's trying to fire away and get away with what he can right now.
Is the Trump administration genuinely interested in helping to end the war? Is it a priority for President Trump? And what should the administration be doing differently to secure peace?
Well, these are great questions also, because I do believe that this is a very high priority for President Trump. He talks about it all the time. He wants to see an end to the killing, and end to the suffering, an end to the war. There's no doubt about it. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that he's focused on what else. So a ceasefire where people are no longer in a hot combat, yes, but will that result in a long-term peace, or will it simply allow Putin to regroup and plan to attack again? Unless we deal with the issue of violent Russian nationalism that views, and imperialism that views that Ukraine is not a separate and sovereign state, but a part of Russia, we're going to continue to have a problem even if we get a ceasefire. So, what needs to be done is to actually ratchet up the pressure on Russia. We have put enough pressure on Ukraine where Zelensky is recognizing that we now need a ceasefire, but we have not put that kind of pressure on Russia. We need to starve their state finances. They are paying for this war with sales of oil and gas and sanctions evasion. We need to increase the sanctions, tighten up their implementation, keep oil prices low, and make sure that Russia is not able to pay for this war anymore.
And speaking of sanctions, we've heard President Trump today saying he's considering ratcheting up sanctions on Russia. You think he's really serious this time?
He said this, on day one in the Oval Office that he's considering it. He said it after the attacks in Sumy on Palm Sunday. He said it again today. I mean, when is he going to stop considering and start doing?
Do you think the Trump administration really understands Russian President Vladimir Putin and his goals in Ukraine and his long-term goals for Europe?
Well, I think in this administration, it's one person that decides, and that's President Trump. I don't think the others really are in a decision-making ability. So I could point to people who I think do understand Vladimir Putin and what he stands for, but there's only one person that matters, and that's President Trump. President Trump's tweet on the weekend after these horrendous Russian attacks indicates that he did not accept that Putin is a violent criminal, that he wants to take over all of Ukraine, that he's responsible for war crimes, that he doesn't care about killing civilians. Um, he said in his tweet that Putin I've known him for a long time. What he's doing doesn't make any sense. He's gone absolutely crazy. If he actually understood Putin, then he would not be surprised by this at all. This is what Putin has been doing for years and years. It's no surprise at all. So to say that it's suddenly now he's going crazy means that he never really understood what Putin's about.
Does Europe have the capacity to support Ukraine if the U.S. fully withdraws its assistance?
I think it does. I think it does. Europe has underinvested in defense equipment and defense industry for decades, but they have the money, and they have the money both to invest in that now, and many of them are doing so. We're going to have a NATO summit next month where all of the countries are going to pledge 5% of GDP towards defense in one way or another. And they can also use some of that finances that they have, and they have plenty of money to buy American weaponry and supply that. There's no restriction on that. So I think that Ukraine is in a fundamentally different position now than it was in 22. It is both stronger on its own, and Europe is more capable, and it's not going to be needing American charitable aid in the way that it needed in 22. The more the better, the more it can buy, the more that it can finance, the better. But I think Ukraine is in a fundamentally different position, and I think Europe is as well.
Kurt, we're just about out of time, but I do have a final question. Does the U.S. Ukraine minerals deal recently signed offer any security guarantees for Ukraine, either explicitly or implicitly?
Well, as you indicate, it's not a document about security guarantees. It's a document about exploitation of natural resources and creating a recovery investment fund for Ukraine out on the back of those resources. So it's not about security guarantees. Now, that being said, the fact that the U.S. is invested in this, wants this fund to be successful, wants Ukraine to successfully exploit these resources so that the U.S. can be paid back for assistance that it has given to Ukraine, there is now a vested interest. So that vested interest should be something that Putin takes into account. It should give the U.S. an interest in Ukraine's security as well. But that's not what this document is about on the surface. It's just about the economic relationship.
Kurt, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Krynytsia.
Yeah, Michael, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
I have been speaking with former Ambassador Kurt Volker, who was a U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations from 2017 to 2019, and also a U.S. Ambassador to NATO from 2008 to 2009. This episode of Krynytsia has been produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. And I'm Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia. Until next time, that's all for now.